Good morning. We'll call to order our regular meeting of the Waxahachie ISD Crisis Management Team. Thank you all very much for being here. Today is April 13th. It is 11:34 in the morning. We are now in a regular session of our Crisis Management Team meeting. If you would please look at our minutes from our most recent meeting on January 26th, 2022. Once you've had an opportunity to review those, I will entertain a motion and a second to approve those minutes. Got a motion from Mr. Gerke. Is there a second? Got a second from Mr. Gomez. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, our minutes are approved from our previous meeting. At this time, now at 11:35 a.m., we are going to go into closed session pursuant to Section 551.076 of the Government Code to deliberate the specific occasions for implementation of security personnel and devices in the manner which has been posted on our agenda. We should not last long in closed session. At this time, we are adjourned to closed session. So, Well, good morning again. It is now 11:41, and we are reconvened into open session. Thank all of you for those of you who are watching us, and obviously thank all of you who are here in this room. Got a lot of great campus and district leaders, and two of our trustees and folks from the city. We're genuinely appreciative of everyone who is here today. And so our first item, discussion of continued development of our SRO program and security team under the leadership of Waxahachie Police Department Lieutenant Josh Oliver. Josh?
Our SRO programs, we'll start with them. We went through our annual training in February and March, and that's required training from the state of Texas for all TCOLE licensed police officers. So we have to have 40 hours of training. So the Waxahachie Police Department did that in-house, so we kind of split it up so not all our guys are in those classes at one time. And they went through and did things like they got CPR recertified, and one of the new things that the police department's implemented is some ballistic shields that are, when they carry it around, it looks almost like a Spartan shield that's bulletproof. It stops rifle rounds. So it's a neat tool that the police department has for active shooter type situations. So understandably, when you have those type of shields, you have to do a lot of training with how to maneuver and walk around with them and how to use them. So all of our SROs went through that process. So really good training. As far as the security team's concerned, we've had some people that recently went through all the Marshal certification and the Marshal program. They passed all their psychological evals. So the security and school marshal guys, those guys are going strong. The team's full up, and we're just gearing up for next year with that. I will say one of the things that plagued us, and Belvis can talk to this better than I can, is the fact that we're dealing with a lot of sickness and a lot of people out. So luckily we have 2 rovers that we can put into the elementary schools and kind of move them around. But those guys have been stretched pretty thin lately with just illness and the usual springtime type things. But that program seems to be going strong as well. We did also, one last thing is regards to that, we sent out evaluations to all of our principals just to get feedback on how well our security officers and our SROs and things like that are doing. And we really do look at those and see, hey, do we have the best fit for this campus as far as security officers are concerned? Are there things that we as a team, as a department as a whole, need to improve on? So we really do value that feedback from those principals.
Any questions for Josh? Well, thank you, Josh. Next, and Josh has given this presentation to our Board of Trustees on Monday night, but as we had discussed at our January meeting, we did a full-scale lockdown and then reunification drill at Waxahachie High School on March 11th. Just about everybody in this room, I think everybody in this room had a part in that, so this won't be a surprise, but Josh has put together a fantastic presentation regarding things we learned, things we want to do better, and just lessons from the experience. So Josh, go ahead.
I gave this presentation at the school board meeting, and after it was over, Lisa Red was giving me a hard time about how many times I said the word fantastic. So my goal today is to not say that word at all as I go forward. We talked about our vision as a district where innovation thrives and growth is limitless. And I think a great example of innovation was when we did this reunification. It was fantastic.
It was a really well-run day, and as Lieutenant Oliver said, we're just so grateful for the work that everyone in this room did, all the folks at the high school, all the folks, support services, transportation, you name it, working together, coming together to do it. Of course, it's hard to completely practice a real-life scenario. I mean, you're very prepared that day for practice. We did our best to try to, leave some things that, weren't as thought out and as prepared, but, you still know that things move pretty fast when you're ready to take kids to a center. We know that on any given day, the Civic Center won't be as ready as it was on March 11, but I do believe in the commitment from all the folks at the city and the Visitors Bureau, the Convention Center, to take care of us, and that's an amazing relief. It's nice to have gone through the process, to have all the folks at the high school know that in the event we ever had to do this, we could. There's been some conversation, well, could we do it at another campus? Well, it's a big disruption to a campus to do this. So we don't have any other live events quite like this planned this year. Our next item is to discuss our drills. So we do drills on all of our campuses every month, every semester, every year. But this particular reunification drill, what we will likely do sometime this summer, and while we still have our elementary principals with us, is do a tabletop. We might highlight a specific elementary campus so that we could go through a fact-based scenario, but let all of our secondary and elementary principals come and just listen to the conversation as we then talk about and discuss what we would do. It won't be the same without the students, but it will be useful just again to let minds run with what the plans would look like in the event of an actual need to take kids from a campus and hold them for a while to then safely reunite them with parents. We had some things that we prepared for that we didn't even use. We had movies and other things for entertainment in the student room that as the day went along, so thankful to Cam and her team. The main thing was getting the kids fed. Once the kids had, something to eat, something to drink, they were all right. They had their phones, but we did have the capacity to show movies. Had we, felt like there was going to be more time between those whose parents weren't coming and then getting them back to school. We just didn't wind up doing that. But that's also part of those go kits in the event we ever have to use that. So again, like Josh opened the floor, are there any questions? Again, thank y'all very much. And then now our next item is just a discussion of our safety drills at our campuses pertaining to all hazards and threats.
So it was interesting at the beginning of COVID because they kind of tweaked some of the things that the school safety center did. So usually there's a fire drill that happens every month that's required by the schools. And some of those requirements, because you didn't want groups of people together and things like that, for the fire drills, they said, hey, let's just do one per semester. Just talk to your kids about where we exit and how we go and things like that. So at the beginning of this year, the Texas School Safety Center didn't change their approach on that. But my outlook on it at this point is, hey, COVID's pretty much subsided. Let's do fire drills regularly like we used to. Fire drills is the big one. For the most part, though, I would say every time we have to use the Duress app and use those alerts, it usually goes really well. We'll get a handful of people that maybe they transferred from another campus to this one and didn't get switched over and things like that. But for the most part, I would say that the app and the alerts and the drills are going really effectively when we do those drills.
And so this committee had a lot to do with acquiring that Duress app. The good news is it's working really well. Mm-hmm. There's still things we're learning, and there's still areas on campuses where there's occasional black holes to Wi-Fi and 5G capacity. And so we know, the need is there for constant improvement for networking. But
Hey, Belvis,
the app itself is incredibly useful. We all see drills as they come, and we get a blue flag if it's just a drill. It's a red flag if it's an actual crisis, and then the system keeps a record of all of the drills that have occurred. So anytime we need to look to see what drills have been conducted on which campus, it becomes very handy
Yes.
to be able to see everything that a particular campus has done. Any questions about our drills? Well, if not, we get, as I know you get, news about information that occurs in other districts. And so there was a particular scenario that had arisen out of Kansas City with the involving swift action of both a campus administrator and a SRO on that campus to alleviate a concern. So Josh, you want to just run through that scenario and then maybe some others to discuss lessons learned?
That kind of sent me down a rabbit trail where I started looking at all the school shootings that have happened in 21, 22 so far. I pulled this up and this was like a pretty one slide. I promise it's not that much. We're going to blow through a lot of these real quick. Orange, but I want you to look at trends and things that stand out with you just so we can discuss this at the end of these. This was initially, it was in South Carolina back in August, initially reported as a drive-by, and they found out that it wasn't. A 14-year-old opened fire in a school parking lot at dismissal time and 3 kids were wounded. He was apprehended an hour and a half later, but part of the feedback the school district got after that was, hey, you need to implement metal detectors. I will say when I was reading through a lot of these, that seems to be something that after the fact, these school districts are like, oh, we should have been doing metal detectors. I'm happy to say one that, yeah, we've been doing that for a while on our secondary campuses. So, that was Orangeburg. Woodbridge, Virginia. After a football game ended, they canceled it because of rain. High school age subject goes up to another group of kids, covers the wall, and pulls a gun and starts firing off several shots. Come to find out, the 2 kids that were hit weren't even involved in the original altercation. It was like they were just kind of standing in the background. Cherryville, Pennsylvania, an argument between students after a high school football game ended in gunfire. A civilian was wounded. Here's the bad thing about this one was, this one made the news quite a bit because how the police department responded. So this car drives by, it's a shooting, they start shooting out the window. The police returned fire and in the process accidentally hit an 8-year-old girl who was there at the football game. She ends up passing away because of that. So one of the things that really stood out to me with this is the training that your security officers and police officers have matter. And the people that you have responding to those things matter. Wilmington, North Carolina, this is a 15-year-old student was shot in a fight. 1 week prior, he had been suspended for fighting with another student, and he had sent out messages and social media posts that said, things are going to be different when I get back to school. When he got back to school, less than 4 hours after he got back, he got into a fight, pulled out a gun, and shot the guy he was fighting 3 times. That's an actual photograph from the fight that took place over there. 4 hours after he got back. Winston-Salem, North Carolina, several students fighting. A 15-year-old shot another student. He ended up passing away. This was a weird one-off domestic violence situation in California. Amanda Kloss was a bus driver. She had 1 student that was on the bus. He hunted her down, rammed the school bus with his truck, and then ended up firing shots into the school bus. Police officers got into a pursuit with him, chased him down two other 17-year-old students that were wounded because of the Eric gunfire. Here's an interesting one. The student that did the shooting, he had been convicted of aggravated assault just months before this incident took place. And he was there at the school. She was there at the school with a gun.
Do you know whether or not that school had no?
I don't know. Wichita, Kansas, 6 students left East High School for lunch. They had an ongoing dispute with another 3 students. These 6 people, they just had constant disputes, constant squabbling going on. So they left the school for lunch. And in the course of that, they ended up getting into a fight and argument in which a firearm was used. I didn't make this up. The police chief's name is Gordon Ramsey. I did a double take. That's his name. But he said his department seeing an increase in firearms amongst teens. Memphis, Tennessee, Cummings Elementary School. This is a 13-year-old student ended up pleading guilty to attempted murder. He and another 13-year-old got into a fight in a stairwell. There was an SRO that was there who immediately started to give that kid first aid and probably saved his life. They said everyone that morning walked through metal detectors, so they're not sure how the kid got the gun into school. They did say that those 2 boys had been arguing for weeks, and they set up a meeting. They met in that stairwell, started fighting, and one of them pulled the handgun from his pocket. New Mississippi, this is a strange incident where a first grader took a gun to school in their backpack. It wasn't intentional shooting. The gun went off in the backpack and struck another student. Houston, Texas, 25-year-old former student armed with a rifle, probably had some mental health issues, shot out the glass front door of the high school and went in. The principal was putting the school on lockdown. He got shot in the back. The guy that went in there suffered from mental health issues, is what it was. But they were able to subdue him and get him under control. The principal ended up being just fine. I think he was released from the hospital probably later on that night. We know this one is the Mansfield Timberview High School. A fight escalated. Not sure if the kid had the gun on him or he went out to his car to get the gun, but he came back with a gun. 4 people were injured, including a 15-year-old and the teacher. The family said it was because he was bullied. Other people, including the police, said he's involved in some high-risk activity. Chicago, Illinois. This was a weird one. It's almost like the guy was waiting for him across the street, not really targeting a single person. When the security officer went to open the doors to release kids for school that day, a student across the street opened fire, or somebody opened fire on him. The security officer was struck several times, and a student was also wounded in this situation. Aurora, Colorado, 3 students. This looks like it might be kind of a gang-related thing. A group of kids said they were armed because they were worried they were going to be jumped by a rival gang group. And so one boy went out, they kind of sent out a guy to scope them out and see where they were hanging out in the parking lot. He seems to have sent a message to the shooter and said, hey, they're right there, they're in their car, and he walked out, and as soon as he saw them, started opening the fire. He pretty much ambushed those other kids in their car. But they are saying they think that was gang-related. This happened to them were wounded in the parking lot of a high school during the football game. Not sure what's going on with that. There wasn't a whole lot of information out there on that one. Student, this is in November, was wounded. Another one in the bathroom after a gun sale went down. They went to school to sell a gun. They did it in the bathroom, and it went south. And another one ended up being wounded. This was the first situation when we started hearing about ghost guns this 16-year-old shooter used a handgun after he went out in the bathroom. His parents had bought that handgun for him. If I remember correctly, it was a birthday present. But it looks like he did this for notoriety. One of the first questions he asked law enforcement officers was, where did they send my handgun? He had researched school shootings extensively before he did this, and not only that, he talked to other students about it. The parents were also charged because they provided him with a handgun in that case. Humboldt, Tennessee, this was an 18-year-old shooter. A man was killed and one died 4 months later as a result of his wounds. It was a basketball game. They were in the lobby and got into an argument. These weren't students. These were people there that were attending the basketball game, and that fight broke out in the lobby. Bloomington, California, a 12-year-old was killed. This one is strange. A 12-year-old was killed. His stepmother was wounded when a teenager opened fire on their vehicle outside of an elementary school. A 9-year-old that was playing on the playground was also injured as well. 2 individuals approached the car, shot, and then took off running. It really sounds like a hit or an ambush or something. It's so strange. Kansas City, Missouri, 2 teenagers were wounded in the parking lot of a school during a basketball game. The disturbance was between teenagers that didn't even attend the school. They were just hanging out in the parking lot. 2 17-year-olds were wounded while they were sitting in the car. This also happened in the parking lot. 3 juveniles approached them, shot, they fled, and they were later arrested. This happened in the parking lot of Valley High School after a basketball game. No injuries were reported, just gunfire. A 16-year-old student wounded an 18-year-old student around noon. They were relatives. At first they said, oh, we think it was a dispute about like a equal girlfriend or something like that. Come to find out it was a relative that deceased. These 2 family members got to a fight about it. One of them ended up shooting the other one, and they think that it was premeditated, like that was in the school. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This is another one. It was a school van. A 15-year-old boy. He got on a school vehicle, so not a school bus, but kind of a school van that they would use for transportation. When this Oliver Citywide Academy was being dismissed, 2 masked gunmen went up to the van, shot the boy twice in the chest and then took off. He was taken to the hospital where he later died. 19-year-old was shot and killed. Another 19-year-old man in the parking lot after a basketball game. He had a gunshot wound to his leg and died shortly afterwards. There's a fight that broke out between a 15-year-old student who was killed and then another 17-year-old student was critically injured. 2 suspects were arrested. One of the things I thought was interesting in this was the superintendent had sought school mental health help months before the shooting took place. And that was one of the headlines of one of the news stories about it. No, I know, it's kind of misleading, right? No, he wanted school mental health help, not for the superintendent, for the students at the school. A 6-year-old was wounded. It looks like he was targeted in the parking lot of sort of dispute. They constantly argue with each other for weeks leading up to it. One day this kid brought a gun to school. The suspect that was charged was 14 years old. And that is, yeah, that's the most recent one. So what is the thing that stood out to you when we talked about all these different things? 14 and 15-year-olds. That's one of the things that I was really shocked by, that it seems like time and time again, it was 15-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 14-year-olds. So, well, and that kind of surprised me, because if you were going to say, hey, Josh, what age do you think are most at risk for the breaking? I was like 17, 18-year-olds, like your late teens. And I was really shocked by the fact that it's more like your freshman, sophomore age kids. So maybe it is something that the training. Just sporting events. And not necessarily in the sporting event itself. It seemed like it was usually in the parking lot, and then maybe one or two cases in the lobby. There were a handful of the football games, the basketball games really stood out. There in the parking lot.
One of them stood out to me when the kid had to run. It's like the principal allowed him to bring the bag himself to the office. Because we know in the process of that, if we're gonna search a kid bag, we take ownership of that bag and let's go into the office. And if it's not, then oh well, we still took that bag from the kid before they're able to come in there. We just don't understand why they lie. Yeah. When we say it's a weapon, we don't even really say, hey, you come with your bag. We go in and get the bag and say, come go with us. So that is like, if I can, you know what they're about and do that.
Yeah. No, and I think that too, when you tell the kid, hey, I want to search your bag, and they say, no, you're not doing it, and they start moving it, do they get in there? Well, and not only that, they had a report that this kid had a gun to begin with, and the two APs went there to search that individual without the SRO, a part of SRO. What's that?
The SRO should be waiting outside the glass door, they brought the kid out, the SRO's already there, not after the fact. That's just, it's just, they don't know what they're doing.
And I'll be honest, when we go to search, and if we are going to search a student for any reason, we always take an SRO 1 and 2. That student never touches their backpack. Myself, the AP, somebody else picks up that backpack. We do not allow students to pick up their backpack.
Well, it's immediately a safety issue. And that means how we're going to search the bag. We don't want that kid being able to get around it, because I don't know what they have in there. I don't know if they've got pocket knife, I don't know if they've got handguns, whatever it is, so we want to keep that bag in there. Exactly. What else? Anything else stand out to you?
I think,
Stating the obvious, I don't think it's a female problem, more of a male shooter.
There wasn't a single case that I looked at that's happened this year, that it's been.
In a lot of the cases, it seemed like there were signs that pointed to issues, which goes back to building those relationships and knowing your kids.
And responding when you see those calls for alarm, and that's why, we've got our behavior threat assessment teams at every campus, and the leadership here, Jacob Perry and Ginger Robinson. That's why we have tip 411, to allow students to report things anonymously, but they'll put things out there on social media, and you just respond. And that's what the high school's very good at, our junior highs, elementaries as well, to not ignore any of them. And who knows what threats you've been able to essentially resolve and undo before they became alarms. I'm certain each and every one of you on campuses and in the leadership that have addressed a concern when you saw it first. Just bring in a kid, let them talk to a counselor, talk to them. bring in the SRO and security when it's necessary if you've got a live threat. And our relationship with the city has never been better. Not just our SROs, but patrol and investigators too with Waxahachie Police Department never ever fail. Any night that we hear a concern, if it's 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the evening, they will go make a house call. They will go after midnight. Yes, it may be an alarm to a family, but we want to address it. We don't set up our campuses as bait, so to speak. We will address it before they come to school.
I will say back to that point, that was one of the things that my heart dropped every time I saw where school officials knew. They never said there was a fight between these two students, but they would say there was a dispute. There was an ongoing dispute between these two kids, and it culminated in the use of a handgun at school. It's almost like it just under the surface, these kids just had tension and were butting heads and were never addressed. And that's how I think it up. And I go back to, I threw that mental health quote up there from the superintendent. I love the fact that we have mental health counselors at the schools. I think they're being utilized, and Victor can tell you there's a waiting list for them. And if we can use those counselors to help stop some sort of dispute or disagreement between some kids, then maybe we can save something like this from happening here.
Those mental health counselors have been a vital resource to us. And I'll put a plug in for the Lutheran counselors. We have an opportunity to possibly get a third one. It's a need. I mean, we are on the waiting list. Our kids need it. I've had to call Oliver at night several times just to do welfare checks with students that have threatened to harm themselves. And the mental health of our students has changed since COVID, and it's definitely been needed. Yeah, I've asked for another one for high school and another one for our elementary. We don't have enough.
Well, and I was just gonna say, they're being utilized.
We have to.
That's- And I'll talk to this just because I catch the police department side of mental health and the school side of mental health. Earlier this week at Simpson Elementary, we had a student, that needed some help. And, our police officers went out there, and, our biggest problem with the police department right now, even being this close to the city of Dallas, is we can't find beds that are open in psychiatric facilities. We will call a psychiatric facility and they'll say, sorry, we don't have room. And so that's one of the biggest problems we face is even if parents want to get their kids into a psychiatric facility, they can't because there's no beds. Number two, if you try to get in with a therapist or a psychiatrist right now, there's a waiting list for it, sometimes 3 to 6 months. So the fact that we have people in-house that can do it is such a blessing. That's such a benefit for our kids. But just like the rest of the county is in dire need of this help, so are our students. And now, even though we have that resource there, we find ourselves in the same shoes as everybody else, that there's a waiting list because the need is so great.
We have a student that just recently had to go out of the state to seek help and was hospitalized outside the state.
And you would think, here being in DFW, we would have ample resources for this.
Jacob had his hand up.
Sorry, Jacob. You have the floor.
No, seriously, one of the ones stuck out to me was that one of the kid who was involved in the shooter was arrested for aggravated assault months before, and it wasn't in Texas. So what stood out to me was, and you and I have had a discussion before, we'll find out, like if it's a county entity that this does
Cam had her hand up too.
Ms. Harris had the same
Okay.
response I did. Thank you.
All right.
I know it was 31 slides, but it was pretty long, but I hope it was beneficial and maybe brought some stuff.
All right, thanks.
Awesome, glad, thanks,
Well, thank you all very much. Well, our only remaining action for item, and this comes out of our discussion in closed session, but I'd like a motion and a second to approve our recommended addition to our multi-hazard operation plan to address train derailments. Got a motion from Mr. Perry. Do I have a second? Got a second from Ms. Harris. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Thank you all very much. And then our last item of discussion, and this may be the last time we ever discuss it because there's not much to discuss right now. And that is our response to COVID-19, an update regarding current conditions, the conditions, not to tempt fate or our Heavenly Father in advance of Easter, but we're in a good way right now. The pandemic is not a pandemic here at this time. We have stopped doing district-wide updates because the updates kept saying 0 cases. So throughout the majority of the spring, we've been fortunate that the surge that came with Omicron came and went over the winter, and by February, it was gone, and it is not here now. So we are very much acting like post-COVID, while our folks in support services continue to keep our buildings clean. Yes, sir?
Just so that everybody knows, we're gonna continue doing our disinfecting through the end of the year, just in case we have an outbreak of flu or anything like that. But next year we'll reevaluate that doing it maybe just once a day instead of twice.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Gerke?
And we'll do the same with the buses also. We will continue that process. We may just reduce it next year to 1 time a day or periodically.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you all. Ms. Bousquet would be here normally with us. The good folks at Ellis County found her name and found her address and invited her to jury duty today, so she's not with us. But unfortunately, there is no emergency in regard to COVID to talk about, and this will hopefully be the last time we have this item on our agenda. So I thank you all for being here. Is there any other discussion that you'd like to have before we adjourn? If not, I'll consider a motion to adjourn. Do we have a motion? Got a motion from Ms. Robinson, second from Ms. Bridges. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all at 12:31 p.m.
I thought for a minute they wanted to stay and talk longer.